Hi, my name's Chris Mays, and I am a partner with Armanino. I lead our family office practice nationally. I'm the co-leader, and this podcast is basically a way for us to talk about things that are relevant for family offices. And today I have Mike Moore, who is our Armanino's cost segregation expert. And we're going to talk a little bit about cost segregation and how it can benefit wealthy families. So with that, Mike, super excited to have you on the podcast. And if we could start, if you could give us your background, because I think it's kind of interesting, we'd love to start out with that.
Sure, Chris. Thanks for having me. My name's Mike Moore. I'm a managing director in Armanino's cost segregation practice. Yeah, in terms of background, I have been performing cost segs for nearly 20 years now. I was with another large accounting firm, CPA firm, prior to joining Armanino a couple of years ago. But prior to that, my background is actually in construction. I'm a licensed general contractor and made my living building things and renovating things for different clients. So I never had any intention of ever working for a financial services firm, but 20 years on, here I am.
Perfect, right on. Yeah, well, I actually think that your prior work experience makes you extremely, or at least my experience is dealing with you, it makes you extremely relevant because you're able to bridge the gap between the construction teams and professionals and the accounting folks. So yeah, so okay, so interesting background. Could you provide a brief explanation on what cost segregation is and how it benefits real estate owners?
Sure. It's really a net present value tool. We use an engineering and construction cost estimating analysis of either an acquired building or a purchased and acquired facility or a newly constructed facility. And we use engineering and cost estimating techniques to break that project down into its component parts. And then we apply kind of revenue rules and case laws to different components of them that qualify for accelerated depreciation. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is break down that building and move as much of it as we can from a longer duration, real property or residential rental property into qualifying personal property and land improvement property assets.
So, okay, so if you didn't use cost segregation, you would have to use the longer term uh, depreciation schedules, and it so cost segregation just allows you to accelerate the depreciation, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not gaining you depreciation. We're just accelerating it into the earlier years. Without a study, typically you would either depreciate over 39 years or 27 and a half years for residential rental assets. And then with the use of a study, we can move, anywhere from 10 to 30% of that total asset basis into a shorter depreciable life.
Right. So you're getting additional non cash uh, expense or deduction. So you're able to cover more of the what would otherwise be taxable income sooner.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you gain that depreciation now, minimize or limit your federal income tax, which you can then reinvest over the period of time of the building ownership.
So I imagine, like, we went almost a decade or over a decade with ZIRP, right? Zero interest rate policy, where the time value of money was basically zero. And now the time value of money, the risk-free rate, right around 5%. So there's a real real difference in the time value of money. Has that increased the people's use of cost segregation since it's a time value of money play?
I wouldn't say so far we've seen too much of a difference. Honestly, what drives applicability of cost segregation is your profitability. Can you use those deductions or can you not? And that's where obviously time value of money is important, but also just on the straight dollar for dollar side, can I use the deductions? Which, if you're a real estate professional, you can carry forward, but they're much more valuable if you can use them in the current year.
Right. So what types of property are eligible for cost segregation studies?
It's funny over having done this for so long. I mean, you have your basic standard buildings, which apartments, banks, offices, warehouses, medical office buildings, but we've done everything from manufacturing to a gold mine in Alaska to different types of shipbuilding and boat building manufacturing facilities. Really, any income producing property can potentially be segregated and depreciation can be accelerated.
Okay, so what about like if you had a single family home that was rented out, could you do it on a single family home?
We absolutely can. Yeah, that would we've in recent years that has become a lot more common. So we have seen a lot of those, a lot of portfolio acquisitions of several single family homes. But yes, the same depreciation rules can be applied to those as they can to and say an apartment building or hotel. It's the same rules, same concept.
Are there any property types that wouldn't make sense for cost segregation?
Um, not really. I
I
mean,
mean,
the
raw land, I guess.
obviously, yes, land. Some high value land estates, where you have maybe a higher component that needs to be allocated to land rather than depreciable building may have some downfall, but really, one thing you do have to be mindful of is if your property is leased to a tax exempt entity, there's some requirements that we use ADS lives, which gonna change the nature of the depreciation and whether or not you can take bonus, but that's something that we analyze on a case by case basis and
So
make the
bonus
best decision.
depreciation is available for some of the equipment?
It is absolutely, yeah, the equipment as well as any of the assets that we classify under 20 years, 5 year or 7 year personal property or 15-year land improvement assets, as well as 15-year qualified improvement property assets. Those are all eligible for any prevailing bonus depreciation rate that's available.
Right, okay. But to get bonus depreciation, would you have had to have placed it in service within 1 year of the cost segregation study? Or can you,
No. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, yeah, no, that's the question. Because it would seem like, just thinking about bonus depreciation in isolation, not inside of cost segregation, like you need to apply it to an asset that was within 1 year of service, right? So if you buy a truck or a aircraft or any of those types of assets, I believe the rules are that you have to take that bonus depreciation within the first year of service.
That's one of the nice things with the revenue procedure that allows us to file a 3115, an automatic method change. You can change the makeup of your real property asset into personal land improvement and then the remainder of real property and take the applicable bonus depreciation rate in the current year. You'd have to file a 3115, an automatic method change. There's no advance consent required. It's actually a very common and easy form to fill out. But yeah, you do not. You can apply bonus depreciation in the year you place it in service, as well as look back to previous years for an asset that's already been held.
So so you can't gain any additional depreciation. Is that, I mean, what if you do the study and you look and you say, hey, the value of the asset's actually greater than my cost basis in it? Is there's no way to exceed where you are already in the depreciable value of the asset?
Unfortunately, there isn't. Your basis is ultimately your basis,
Okay.
and that won't change unless there were renovations or such that would be a different asset after the fact.
Right. So yeah, so subsequent capital improvements which increased your basis. Okay, so let me ask this: does it impact property taxes then? Like if you undertake a cost segregation study and you delineate certain things as personal property or business property, like does it change the way that property taxes are assessed?
It does not, and it's really important to note one thing that we coach clients is this is a federal tax study, and it should be
Okay.
applied to federal taxes because the the objectives are completely different. We're trying to push as much as we can into personal property, but states that have personal property taxes, it's not the same makeup of asset that qualifies for depreciation purposes versus tangible personal property like a state would charge you for a state property tax.
Right. So, um, give me a sense of like the range of the benefit, right? Just like if you, how much could you shift like the depreciation forward in time? And and I understand it's going to be different for every single situation, but just to give, I guess what I'd like to give the audience like a order of magnitude of what's possible in a
Sure.
situation, just so they, the relevancy, um, because I know with the one client that we worked on, uh, that client was thrilled, right? because
Sure, sure,
because it improved their situation and it moved the needle, you know?
sure. It had enough personal impact that it moved the needle. But yeah, anywhere from, again, if we're looking at I say the bare minimum is an empty warehouse type building. We're probably looking at 10 to 15% of that can be shifted into a shorter depreciable life. But, you know, over the years, we've done different types of production facilities. So I'll use an ethanol production facility. Well over 70% of that
Oh, wow.
property can be accelerated into a shorter depreciable life. And the range anywhere between, so apartments are a hot item that we've done for the last several years. You're looking at anywhere from 20 to 30% of a typical suburban apartment community can be accelerated.
So if you have a $5 million apartment building and you can shift, let the property value, X land value, you can shift 5 million, 20% of that $5 million, so $1 million into the current year as additional depreciation expense. Is that roughly
Yeah,
the mechanics and math?
that's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So right. So that's fairly significant, depending with anyone's tax rate, right? I mean, it's going to be a couple $100,000 of savings in year one. What do uh, what do cost segregation studies? What's the range of costs and what drives costs for cost segregation studies?
What drives the cost is really an estimate of how our hours that it'll take to fix or to complete the study. We um we as an accounting firm have to stay away from contingency fees, so we give the client a fixed fee up front, and those range anywhere from $7,500 on the low end, maybe even a little lower for the single family homes you were referring to, into upwards of six figures for large manufacturing or
Right.
portfolios of apartment buildings. But our average project size is between 12.5 and 18.5. That's
Okay.
kind of bread and butter of where we would typically land.
What are the, if you were to calculate the ROI on those engagements for the client, like what are the ranges of ROIs can they expect?
Usually we're at least probably 10 to 1
Yeah, so it's
on
kind of
large projects. It's yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. I didn't mean to
kind of a
take away,
no-brainer. Yeah. Yeah, I
but
mean, that calculation probably isn't totally fair because eventually 27 years from now, 27 and a half years, they would get 100% of that depreciation, but it's 27
absolutely
years from now. And you're pulling that depreciation forward, but so but yeah, 10 to 1, you still have a lot of margin of safety, even if it's not quite that good, that it's still
sure.
massively beneficial.
And in our proposals, we actually provide kind of a year by year NPV and depreciation change calculation just for that fact, because you are front loading depreciation. It's not just a straight ROI or a straight NPV. There is some loss of future depreciation, but we provide that as part of our proposal for the client to review.
Yeah, but I know a lot of real estate owners that they love depreciation so much that they're like, if they have a building that they have no more depreciation in it, they either want to rehab it or 1031 it because
For
they
sure.
they 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 want to get back into that the the belly of the curve in terms of depreciation because
Oh
it's
yeah.
valuable for them.
Depreciation is a wonderful way to defer income tax. I mean, it just is, especially for real estate professionals.
Right, right. Yeah, because there's relative, I mean, other than the cost segregation study, there is no other cost. It's a and so you guys have to go equipment by equipment. So is it like, okay, this HVAC system on the roof has X years of life, and this pump down in the basement has X years of life, and this generator that provides the power system backup. Is that literally the process of coming up with a cost
That
segregation?
is somewhat of the process. A lot of those assets are more general and not eligible for accelerated deduction. So
Okay.
if it's not, we don't spend a ton of time on those.
Okay.
What we try to do is model the building and then focus our time and energy and effort in those areas that are going to produce the most additional depreciation. So there can be areas, you'll see us on site visits where we'll look a lot at the electrical panel. That's
Ah,
where a lot of the accelerated deduction comes from. But we may not spend a ton of time on the wall type because no matter what the wall type is, it's a 39-year or
right.
real property asset.
What, like in an apartment building, like what are the things where can you find the benefits? What are the things that have shorter depreciable lives in an apartment building?
So let's starting outside of the building, there's playgrounds, dog fenced areas, parking lots,
So all
um,
the amenities.
all the amenities, the storm drainage. And then when you move into the buildings, it's a lot of finishes. And apartments make such great candidates for cost seg because there so many of them in each building. They're repeatable. There's lots of kitchen cabinetry, there's lots of floor covering, there's lots of decorative lighting, and then the electrical that supports the kitchen equipment. That's the things that we're spending most of our time focusing on in a study.
Okay. And like if I mean, what are like the prime examples, like in terms of like a the age of a building, the proximity to a rehab, that make it ideal for cost segregation?
Really that the funny thing is when your client or our client buys a new building, the depreciation clock starts over. So there's some rules we have to follow in terms of depreciating certain aspects of it and certain assets, but the depreciation really starts over. So at any point, we can do a study. We have had cases in the past where somebody knew that they were going to, they held the building maybe 2 years. They knew they were going to do a significant renovation. We'll do a study first on the existing building, make sure that we put that as appropriate as possible for depreciation. And then we can also do a study on the renovation after the fact. So there's really no specific timeline. It's just a matter of when can you most benefit from those additional depreciation costs.
So if you've had a previous cost segregation study on your building, do you need to do another one, 10 years down the line, or should you, if you've had, are you, one and done?
More than likely, it's one and done, unless there was a significant improvement afterward.
Okay.
Or, we're happy to review it too and see if there's been a lot of just casual cost segregation studies done where either the client didn't want to pay for a full study or the CPA wanted to do it himself, where we've been able to actually redo a study and pull out more property than was pulled out originally. But for the most part, once it's segregated, once those costs are segregated, it makes the most sense just to do it once.
But if you own a building and you haven't done a cost segregation study, is there any reason not to at least reach out to a cost segregation professional, at least go through the upfront assessment of whether it makes sense or not?
The main reason people don't do it is they're unaware. But if you're a flipper, if you hold things for less than 2 years, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense
Right.
to segregate costs. So that's probably if there is a downside, if intention of holding that building for less than 2 years, you're going to have to pay recapture on everything that we accelerate anyway. So there's no real advantage to it. But if you plan on holding it, a lot of family trusts hold these assets for a long time, then it makes a whole lot of sense to at least consider a cost segregation study.
Yeah. But I mean, right now where there are certain property types like office that are really struggling, does it make, I mean, if those buildings are in a lot of distress, does it make any sense to do a cost segregation study in that circumstance?
And that we would probably have them hold off. It really depends on their profitability though, and ability to use those additional deductions.
Right.
That's where it makes the most sense. Not
Yeah.
necessarily not necessarily the state of the economy that the building itself is in, but really the state that the taxpayer is in, and are they paying tax, and can they use this to offset some of that?
But if you own a portfolio of buildings, and you know, can you use the depreciation on one building to offset your income on other buildings?
You can potentially, depending on it's
How it's
how
held?
the structure is related, the
Yeah.
entities that are related to each other. A lot of the work we do is with pass-throughs, and in that case, it rolls up to whomever is at the top of that food chain anyway.
Right. So even if you have a portfolio of buildings that haven't had cost segregation studies and you have taxable income coming out of them, you really should. I mean, there's basically virtually no risk to just take a look at the portfolio in its entirety and at least get an initial ROI calculation of whether the cost segregation study is going to make sense or not.
Absolutely. We've done lots of reviews of portfolios of multiple buildings, and then you can pick and choose which make the most sense or provide the biggest ROI. And yeah, it's usually at no cost to the client for us to review these. So it makes very little in the way of at least having this discussion with your client.
So, I mean, what are the challenges that property owners typically face when implementing cost segregation studies? And like, what are the reasons like that it doesn't work out, or it, you know, does the IRS audit these? I mean, like, tell me the downside.
Sure. Biggest downside is that again, are you not able to use the losses? If you're not a real estate professional, it's a passive activity. So the losses we generate would be against passive income only. The other thing is just too low of a basis. Sometimes the basis is so low that what we would generate in additional depreciation isn't enough to even really pay for the cost of an analysis. But so in terms of downsides, there aren't too many other than A, can you use the depreciation? Do you plan on holding the building for a minimum of 3 to 5 years? And yeah, is there enough basis to make this study worthwhile to you?
And are you able to assess that upfront before embarking on the cost segregation study, so that it's it's risk-free or a kind of a no-brainer for property owners, or
Oh,
have to get into
absolutely.
the
No, we absolutely we do that upfront analysis all the time. We like to say we have an 8% plus success rate from the proposals that we do, but there are 20% of them that just it doesn't make sense, or the client chooses to not go for whatever reason. Um, but absolutely, no harm there's no harm or no cost involved to the client in having us at least review their fixed asset schedules or their acquired assets and just determine if it makes potential sense for
okay, okay. And does the IRS audit these?
them. The IRS does audit these. Honestly, as a professional that's been doing this so long, I wish they would work, because there's a competitive landscape for these. There's a lot of people that have gotten into this and sell these studies. Um, so yes, they are audited. It's There has been a wealth of information over the last 30 plus years, though, of what qualifies and what doesn't. So we like to feel that we're aggressive yet defendable. And, if they're audited, and again, over 20 years, I've had only a handful of them audited. And if there were any changes, it was horse trading, not because of any specific item that they felt was misclassified.
So when you're looking for somebody to do your cost segregation study, what qualifications or credentials should property owners look for when selecting a firm?
Um, we have a lot of boutique competitors that are not accounting firms, and I can't say enough, emphasize enough this how important the tax side is to what we do. So you can pile a bunch of engineers and cost estimators in a room and get a good analysis, but having the ability to bounce tax related ideas off of tax partners and other tax professionals is really important. I mean, it's a for some people, you know, it makes no sense whatsoever to pursue a cost seg because of the tax situation they're in. Whereas the boutique firms, a lot of times, are just pushing to sell a cost seg, not provide the client with the ultimate benefit that benefits them most. And that's what I feel like it's important to in, I'm biased, but I think, that combination of CPA expertise as well as engineering expertise really does provide the best end result for the client.
Right, right, right. Well, I imagine in a pure CPA firm that doesn't have any folks with your background would also struggle, right? Because they're not going to have the depth of expertise
Absolutely.
inside the construction side. So yeah, so I understand why you're a formidable competitor in the space. So are there any other tax strategies that work well in conjunction with cost segregation?
Some of the things we do on the green energy side of things are 45L, which is
Okay.
that's a per unit credit for residential properties. And then another one that we often do in conjunction with cost seg studies are the 179D deduction. That's an energy efficient commercial building deduction up to $5 per square foot.
Wow.
It has to be an improvement only though. That's not on um, an acquisition study. There has to be an improvement. It has to meet certain criteria for energy reduction over a reference building. But that is also something that we can um, scope out preliminarily before we engage the client just to see, we can't guarantee results, but we can most of the time know exactly, hey, this is going to qualify or it's not. And then we'll include that result in our cost seg study.
Right, right, right. Okay. And then I guess, are there any uh, changes or trends you foresee in the field of cost segregation study in the coming years?
Biggest change right now is the Tax Cut and Job Act had bonus depreciation sunsetting. And right
Ah,
now we're in 40% um, bonus depreciation for 2024. It goes to 20% next year. I'm sorry, 60, 40, and 20. So that reduction there's been a bill passed. It didn't get through both sides of Congress to revert back to 100% bonus through, I think, 2027. Um, so right now, that bonus depreciation is probably the biggest thing out there that's could potentially impact what we do and the benefit it derives for our client.
so I guess there's some urgency then, yeah, or I mean, property owners should feel some urgency in terms of, because it's going to go down another 20% next year. Is that the right?
It is, yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Unless something changes, it sunsets. Um, so
And what well, I guess maybe we just answer my next question was like how can property owners what's the best strategy for them to prepare for these changes? And I guess the answer is get your cost segregation study done sooner rather than later because you're going to
sure.
have diminishing benefit over time.
Well, the nice thing is though, with again the revenue procedure rules and the automatic method change, if you do hold off for whatever reason, if your tax situation dictates that you need to wait, that look back component, we can go back and take the bonus depreciation that was law at the time
Okay.
it was placed in service. So, um, yeah, there's not a pressing need because you can kind of recover your bonus depreciation when your situation arises.
Okay. So you could go back to 100% bonus depreciation.
You can, yeah, if you were from 2017 through 2022.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Mike, this was super informative. Really excited to talk to you about this. I mean, to me, it's like the biggest no-brainer, right? It's like if you've got a building that hasn't had a cost segregation study, and it is has any eligibility whatsoever, like you should at least get an initial assessment to see whether it's worthwhile or not. Is there
Absolutely.
okay? Well, hey, again, thank you very much for having for joining us on the podcast, and super great to talk to you again. And you know, my client does rave about the outcomes there, and specifically, you know, it was a competitive process, and I, you know, of course, I had a horse in the race. You're part of Armanino, but I didn't tilt the scale at all, and he went with you, and he's more than satisfied.
Well, that's always great to hear, and that's ultimately our objective is a happy client that's well served. So I appreciate you bringing him to our attention.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.